The crystalline spires of the Zixian Institute of Xenobiology pierced the violet sky, their surfaces refracting the light of 3 moons. Inside her laboratory, Dr. Venna carefully adjusted her ocular enhancement device, her iridescent scales shifting from deep blue to an anxious green as she studied the latest data streaming across her holographic display. Something wasn't right with these readings. She'd triple-checked her equipment, recalibrated her sensors, even requested fresh samples from Earth. But the results remained the same. Human males maintained consistent fertility levels throughout their planetary cycle. No seasonal variations. No hormonal dormancy periods. Nothing like any other known sentient species in the galaxy. "This can't be correct," she muttered, her third eye blinking rapidly in concentration. The implications were staggering. Every advanced species they'd encountered had evolved precise reproductive cycles. It was considered a hallmark of civilization. The Zixians themselves mated once every 7 years, their biology perfectly attuned to their binary stars' alignment. The Centaurians required specific atmospheric conditions present only during their world's equinox. Even the nomadic drift clans synchronized their reproduction with cosmic radiation pulses. But humans, they operated on pure biological chaos. A soft chime announced the arrival of her research partner, Dr. Thex, their tentacled form undulating gracefully through the doorway. Still obsessing over the human data, Venna. "Look at these hormone levels." Venna projected the charts onto the lab's main display. They maintain baseline testosterone production year-round, with only minor fluctuations. Their reproductive cells are constantly regenerating. Thex's tentacles rippled with concern. Perhaps it's an evolutionary response to their planet's unstable climate. Earth's seasons are remarkably short compared to most habitable worlds. That's what I initially thought. Venna pulled up another data set. But these patterns predate their species' rise to prominence. It's not an adaptation. It's a fundamental aspect of their biology. And it might explain their rapid expansion across their planet, their constant drive to explore and compete, and their infamous aggression, Thex added darkly. The Council wasn't pleased about admitting them to the Galactic Federation. Some argued their species was too volatile. Venna's scales flickered with irritation. That's exactly the kind of prejudice that holds back real scientific understanding. Yes, their biology is different, but look what they've accomplished. They went from primitive combustion engines to faster-than-light travel in less than 2 centuries. No other species has evolved so quickly. Which is precisely what worries the Council, Thex countered. That kind of rapid advancement, coupled with their unique reproductive capabilities, some fear they could overwhelm more established species. Or they could be exactly what we need, Venna said quietly, calling up another set of data, this one classified. The declining birth rates among Zixians, the increasing genetic stability issues. Their species' carefully regulated reproductive cycle, once their greatest evolutionary advantage, was becoming their greatest vulnerability. A notification flashed across her display. The human delegation from Earth's Xenological Research Division would be arriving tomorrow. Among them would be their leading reproductive biology expert, someone who might help her understand these puzzling readings. "I'm going to solve this mystery, Thex," Venna declared, her scales settling into a determined purple. "There's something about human biology we're all missing, something that could change everything we think we know about evolution and advancement." What she couldn't say, even to her trusted research partner, was how personal this had become. Her own mating cycle had failed during the last stellar alignment, marking her as one of the growing number of Zixians facing reproductive challenges. If humans held the key to biological adaptability, they might also hold the key to her species' survival. As she prepared her lab for tomorrow's meeting, Venner wondered what the human expert would be like. She'd interacted with humans before, of course. They were becoming increasingly common at the Institute, but never in such a focused, intimate research capacity. Would they understand the magnitude of what she was discovering? Would they be willing to help her explore these implications, even if they led to conclusions that challenged both their species' preconceptions? The 3 moons cast shifting shadows through her laboratory's crystal walls, and Venner found herself pondering the strange twists of evolution that had led to this moment. Tomorrow, she would begin unraveling one of the galaxy's most intriguing biological puzzles, and perhaps find answers that reached far beyond mere scientific curiosity. Little did she know, this research would not only challenge everything she thought she knew about human biology, but would also force her to confront her own deeply held beliefs about progress, civilization, and the true meaning of advancement. The human delegation arrived with all the subtlety of a solar flare. Venner watched from her observation platform as their shuttlecraft descended through the crystalline docking terminal, its utilitarian design a stark contrast to the elegant Zixian architecture. Her scales shifted through shades of anticipation as she prepared to meet the Earth's foremost expert on reproductive biology. The airlock cycled, and Venner felt her respiratory system stutter. The human who emerged wasn't what she'd expected. Dr. Arjun Patel moved with a grace that belied his species' reputation for clumsiness in higher gravity. His dark eyes held an intensity that matched her own scientific curiosity, and his confident stride spoke of someone comfortable in alien environments. Dr. Kathiri, he greeted her in perfect Zixian, his voice carrying unexpected harmonics. Your research on cross-species genetic adaptability is remarkable. I particularly enjoyed your paper on chromatic response patterns in sentient species. Venner's scales flickered with pleasure before she could suppress the reaction. Your pronunciation is excellent, Dr. Patel, but please, standard is fine. I'm curious about your thoughts on my latest findings. They moved to her laboratory, where Vex was preparing the presentation materials. As Venner began explaining her discoveries about human reproductive patterns, she noticed something odd. Rather than showing pride or defensiveness about his species' unique capabilities, Arjun displayed genuine fascination with her analysis. It's strange, she mused, studying the comparative charts, how something we take for granted can appear so extraordinary from an outside perspective. Have you considered that our continuous fertility might be a disadvantage in some ways? Venner's third eye blinked in surprise. A disadvantage, but the evolutionary benefits are balanced against significant costs, Arjun finished. Constant hormone production requires substantial energy. Our reproductive cells' continuous regeneration increases mutation risks. And the psychological effects. He smiled wryly. Well, let's just say there are reasons many human cultures developed complex social structures to manage our biological drives. His candor was refreshing, and Venner found herself sharing more than she'd intended about her research's true purpose. Our species is facing a crisis, she admitted. Our carefully evolved reproductive cycle worked perfectly for millennia, but something's changing. Each alignment brings fewer successful births, more genetic instabilities. Arjun's expression grew serious. You think studying human adaptability might help? Your species adjusted to environmental changes that would have driven most others to extinction. Instead, you thrived, if we could understand how. A harsh alarm cut through their discussion. The laboratory's security system flashed warnings as the environmental controls fluctuated wildly. Arjun's breathing hitched as the atmosphere thinned, while Vena's scales darkened with concern. The containment field around the genetic samples. Thexa's tentacles writhed in distress. It's failing. Without hesitation, Arjun rushed to the control panel. His fingers flew across the alien interface as he initiated emergency protocols that even Vena hadn't known existed. The crisis passed as quickly as it had begun, leaving them all shaken but unharmed. "How did you know how to do that?" Vena demanded, her scales still flickering with residual anxiety. Arjun shrugged, a peculiarly human gesture. "I studied your laboratory systems before arriving. Always better to be prepared, especially when working with sensitive materials. You learned our entire emergency protocol system, just in case." "Humans don't like feeling helpless," he said simply. "We prepare for worst-case scenarios, even when everyone tells us we're being paranoid." Vena stared at him, seeing human biology in a new light. Perhaps their constant state of readiness, reproductive and otherwise, wasn't primitive at all, but rather a sophisticated adaptation to uncertainty itself. While other species evolved to fit their environments perfectly, humans evolved to handle anything their environment might throw at them. As they resumed their work, Vena found herself watching Arjun with growing fascination. He approached each new discovery with a combination of methodical analysis and intuitive leaps that reminded her of her own research style. Their discussions flowed seamlessly between professional analysis and personal insights, challenging her preconceptions about human intellectual capacity. By the time their first day's research concluded, Vena realized she'd learned more about humans than she'd expected, not just from their data, but from working alongside one. As Arjun prepared to return to his temporary quarters, he paused. "Dr. Kathiri, Vena, would you be interested in continuing our discussion over dinner? There's an Earth-style restaurant in the diplomatic quarter. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on human cuisine." Vena's scales shifted through several colors before settling on a pleased rose gold. For research purposes, of course. Of course, Arjun smiled, and Vena found herself wondering if humans' most intriguing adaptation wasn't their biology at all, but their capacity to surprise. The Zixin High Council chamber hummed with tension as Vena presented her findings. Towering crystalline walls reflected the accumulated wisdom of centuries, but today they would hear something unprecedented. "Our studies of human reproductive biology have revealed potential solutions to our genetic crisis," Vena declared, her scales shimmering with conviction. "Dr. Patel and I have discovered that human DNA repair mechanisms could be adapted to stabilize our deteriorating genetic sequences." Chancellor Zex's scales darkened to stormy gray. "You propose we integrate human genetic material into our sacred bloodlines? Preposterous." Arjun stepped forward, his presence commanding despite being the only human in the chamber. "With respect, Counselor, we're not suggesting genetic merger, but rather studying how human adaptive mechanisms could be replicated in Zixin physiology." Vena projected their research data, showing the declining Zixin birth rates alongside promising experimental results. Human cellular regeneration occurs continuously, allowing for rapid adaptation to environmental changes. By understanding these mechanisms, we could modify our own reproductive processes without losing our essential biological rhythms. "And what of the risks?" another counselor demanded. "Humans' aggressive expansion threatens the galactic order. Now you wish to incorporate their biological traits." "Our aggressive expansion," Arjun countered calmly, "stems from the same adaptability that could save your species. We don't just survive change, we thrive on it. The debate raged for hours. Venna and Arjun presented mountains of evidence, addressed countless objections, and gradually saw understanding dawn in some council members' eyes. But opposition remained fierce. During a recess, they retreated to a private chamber. Venna's scales had faded to exhausted pale blue. Perhaps we're asking too much too soon. Hey, Arjun touched her arm gently, sending an unexpected tingle through her scales. Your people faced similar resistance when first developing space travel, didn't they? Change always meets resistance. This is different, Venna sighed. We're challenging fundamental beliefs about species purity, evolutionary destiny. We're challenging fear, Arjun interrupted. Fear of change, fear of the unknown. But you know what I've learned about your people, Venna? You're just as adaptable as humans, you just do it differently. Their eyes met, and Venna felt something shift between them. The past weeks of collaboration had created an understanding that transcended species barriers. In Arjun's presence, she'd found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about humans, and about herself. The council reconvened, but before Venna could return to her presentation, alarms blared throughout the complex. The main research facility was reporting critical failures in multiple systems. The experimental samples, Venna guessed, if the containment fields fail. They raced to the laboratory, finding Fex fighting to stabilize the deteriorating situation. The power grid is compromised, they reported. Backup systems are failing. Arjun immediately linked his personal device to the facility's network. These aren't random failures. Someone's trying to destroy our research. Venna felt cold dread in her core. The conservative faction. They'd rather eliminate the possibility of change than risk their precious purity. Working together, they fought to save their work. Arjun's quick thinking and Venna's deep knowledge of the facility's systems proved a powerful combination. When security forces finally arrived, they found the three researchers exhausted but triumphant, the precious genetic samples secure. The attempt to destroy their research had an unexpected effect on the council. Faced with such extreme opposition, moderate members began to question their own resistance to change. Within days, Venna and Arjun received provisional approval to continue their studies under careful oversight. As they restored their laboratory, Venna found herself watching Arjun with new appreciation. You know, I used to think humans' constant reproductive capability was somehow primitive. But I'm beginning to understand. It's not about constant reproduction, is it? It's about constant readiness for change. Arjun smiled, that now familiar expression that made her scales ripple with warmth. Evolution isn't just about perfecting what works now. It's about maintaining the ability to become what you need to be next. And what are we becoming, do you think? Venna asked softly, aware of how close they were standing. Something new, Arjun replied. Something neither of our species has seen before. The laboratory's crystals caught the light of the setting suns, casting rainbow patterns across their workspace. In that moment, Venna realized their research had evolved into something far more profound than either of them had anticipated. A bridge between worlds and perhaps between hearts. In the months following the attack, the Zixian Institute transformed. Venna and Arjun's research facility expanded, attracting scientists from across the galaxy. Their breakthrough had captured imaginations beyond mere reproductive biology. But opposition persisted. Conservative groups staged protests, claiming their work would destroy Zixian cultural identity. The pressure intensified when Venna and Arjun's relationship became public, their growing closeness seen as proof of humanity's corrupting influence. During a crucial experiment, protesters breached the facility's security. As alarms blared, Vena and Arjun found themselves trapped in the main laboratory. The protesters had disabled safety protocols, causing a dangerous buildup of radioactive material. The containment field is failing. Vena's scales paled to ash white. The samples will be destroyed, along with everything else in the lab. Arjun's face set with determination. Not if we can redirect the energy. He began rerouting power through his own research equipment, using human technology in ways it was never designed for. The gamble worked, but at a cost. Arjun absorbed a dangerous dose of radiation, protecting their research. As medical teams rushed him to treatment, Vena realized some truths transcended species barriers, including love. 5 years later, the Zixian Reproductive Health Center celebrated its first successful birth using the K3-Patal protocol. The infant's scales shifted through rainbow hues, demonstrating unprecedented genetic stability. Vena watched from the observation deck, her own scales glowing with joy. Beside her, Arjun, fully recovered thanks to advanced human medical techniques, squeezed her hand. "Ready to announce the next phase?" he asked. Vena nodded. Their research had evolved far beyond its original scope. They discovered that combining Zixian precision with human adaptability created possibilities neither species had imagined. The High Council had finally approved their proposal for a permanent human-Zixian collaborative research center. More importantly, they'd approved the first-ever interspecies marriage protocol. As they faced the assembled press, Vena's scales rippled with the colors of sunrise. Today marks not just a scientific breakthrough, but a new understanding of evolution itself. True advancement comes not from perfecting isolation, but from embracing change. Arjun stepped forward, his dark eyes meeting hers. "We've learned that strength lies in diversity, in combining the best of different worlds to create something entirely new." Their hands joined as cameras flashed, capturing a moment that would mark the beginning of a new era in galactic history. In the end, the greatest discovery wasn't about reproduction at all. It was about the endless possibilities that arose when hearts and minds opened to change. The success of their work sparked a revolution in interspecies collaboration. Other races began exploring similar partnerships, leading to a golden age of scientific and cultural exchange. And at its heart were two beings who had dared to challenge not just biological barriers, but the very notion of what defined advancement in the cosmos. As three suns set over the crystalline spires of the Institute, Vena and Arjun stood together, their shared vision of the future brighter than any star in the galaxy. They had proven that love, like science, knew no boundaries, and that the greatest adaptations often came from the heart.